Wealth versus race. Millionaire's son rejects 8 heiresses and chooses the black maid. My son is not going to marry for love. He's going to marry for legacy. Vivian Lancaster's words echoed through the golden hall of the Beverly Hills Hotel, muffled only by the incessant click of cameras. The air smelled of expensive champagne and French perfume. Crystal chandeliers reflected the light into thousands of sparkling points over the guests, bankers, businessmen, and luxury magazine columnists. In the center, Adrian Lancaster stood still. Impeccable navy blue suit, perfectly knotted tie, light brown hair slicked back. The smile he showed the cameras looked like porcelain, smooth, controlled, fake. Inside, his stomach burned. Vivian stepped up to the microphone, her silver dress glinting under the flashes. The Lancaster family is committed to the future. Today, I announce that my son will have the privilege of choosing his future wife from 8 young women of respectable and successful families. The guests applauded. A reporter shouted, "Will the wedding be this year?" Vivian lifted her chin. "If it's up to me." "Yes." Adrian discreetly glanced toward the side door of the hall. For an instant, between waiters carrying trays of glasses, he saw Naomi Clarke. Black uniform, white apron, tray in her hands. Her deep chocolate skin glowed under the light, and her voluminous curls fell over her shoulders. She quickly looked away, focusing on her work, but not quickly enough to hide the glimmer of apprehension in her eyes. The event's host began announcing the first heiress's name while Naomi moved away to serve a table in the corner. Adrian felt his chest tighten. Vivian leaned toward him, her smile frozen for the public, and whispered just for him to hear, "Remember, this isn't about what you want. It's about who you are." The words cut like a cold blade. Adrian kept smiling, but clenched his fists under the table. As the second candidate approached the stage, a blonde socialite whispered loudly enough for Naomi to hear, laughing with another guest, "Look at that. Even the waitress can't take her eyes off him." The comment felt like a slap, but Naomi held her composure. She just took a deep breath and kept serving. Suddenly, Vivian announced, and to make this choice even more meaningful, "My son will have only 2 weeks to decide." The hall exploded in murmurs. Adrian, still motionless, could think of only one thing: how to tell everyone his heart already belonged to someone. And she wasn't one of those 8 women. In the corner, Naomi paused for a moment, glancing discreetly at him. Their eyes met for less than a second, but it was enough for a security guard, acting on Vivian's orders, to start walking toward her. What Vivian intended to do with Naomi at that moment would change everything. The guard moved toward Naomi with firm steps, but as if by a stroke of luck, a distracted waiter suddenly crossed his path, bumping into a table and knocking over a champagne flute that shattered on the floor. The sharp sound of breaking glass and the golden liquid spreading over the carpet caught everyone's attention for just a few seconds. Precious seconds. Enough for Naomi to discreetly step back and slip away through the side door toward the kitchen. Adrian followed every move with his eyes, his chest tightening, feeling a knot rise in his throat as if something inside him was begging to protect her. Later, back at the mansion, the atmosphere seemed weighed down by a silent heaviness. Fine, steady rain tapped against the mansion's enormous windows, creating a muffled rhythm that echoed throughout the space. The air was cool, faintly perfumed by the sweet aroma of fresh flowers that always decorated the entrance. Vivian climbed the main staircase with measured steps, holding a glass of red wine whose ruby reflections contrasted with the pristine white banister. Adrian, seated in the living room with a folder of documents open, pretended to review papers, but his distracted gaze betrayed that his mind was elsewhere. When he heard the soft click of his mother's bedroom door closing, he set the folder down on the coffee table and rose silently. The hallway was almost dark, lit only by small sconces on the walls, and his steps were muffled by the thick carpet as he made his way to the kitchen. There, Naomi was gathering wet silverware from the sink, the faint metallic clink echoing softly in the calm room. The warm yellow glow from the pendant light cast a halo over her, highlighting the deep velvety tone of her skin, each feature of her face marked by a rare blend of strength and delicacy. Her voluminous curls fell down her back still slightly, damp from the quick shower she had taken after ending her shift at the hotel. "Are you okay?" Adrian's voice broke the silence, low but heavy with concern. She turned, slightly surprised, but kept her composure, straightening her posture like someone trying to conceal any fragility. "I'm fine. It's just work, Mr. Lancaster." "Adrian, how many times have I told you to call me?" "That?" He gave a faint smile, though his eyes remained serious. Naomi lowered her gaze, running the dish towel through her fingers with mechanical motions. "Today, in the hall?" It was humiliating. "But don't worry, I know my place." "Your place is wherever you want to be, Naomi, and if you'll let me, I want it to be by my side." The air seemed to grow heavier. Her heartbeat quickened, but reason shouted inside her. 2 years working in that house had taught her that lingering glances and kind words in the world of the elite almost always carried ulterior motives. But Adrian, he didn't have that calculating air. There was no arrogance in his tone, only a raw and direct truth she recognized. "You know that's impossible. Your mother would never accept it." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to an almost intimate tone. "I'm not asking her permission." The sudden sound of footsteps in the hallway made Naomi pull away instantly, as if instinctively knowing that their closeness was far too dangerous at that hour. Vivian didn't appear, but the mere possibility of being seen was enough to silence them. Adrian, hands in his pockets, watched her as she left the room through the side door leading to the garden. The simple dress she wore moved with the cool night breeze, her curls swaying gently until the darkness swallowed her completely. Watching her disappear, Adrian felt an uncheckable certainty take root within him. There was no turning back. The decision was made, and no matter how, he would fight against everything and everyone to make sure Naomi was not just a secret. What he could not imagine was that very night, Vivian had already begun moving her pieces, and her first move would come with brutal force. The mansion was wrapped in an almost oppressive silence. Outside, the lights of Beverly Hills shimmered like distant jewels reflecting in the clear night sky. Inside, the only sound was the slow, steady tick-tock of the old pendulum clock in the hallway, each beat seeming to stretch the seconds. Adrian descended the stairs slowly, the banister cold under his hand, making sure his mother had already retired. The kitchen was bathed in a soft, golden light from a hanging lamp. The air held the comforting scent of soap and the faint trace of coffee from earlier. Naomi was putting the last clean dishes away in the cupboard, her loose curls falling gently over her face and back. The simple blouse she wore fit her modestly, yet carried the effortless elegance he admired so much. She was so focused that she didn't notice him until she heard the quiet sound of the door closing behind her. "You could have told me you were coming," she said, surprised but calm. "If I had, you would have found an excuse not to see me." Naomi rested her hands on the polished marble counter, the stone's coolness contrasting with the warmth rising through her body. She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage before saying what she needed to. "Adrian, your mother has already made it clear what she thinks of me. And after what happened at the hotel, everyone must be talking. Let them talk. I don't want any of those women she introduced me to. I don't want to wake up every day next to someone I don't know, when there's already someone who's in my thoughts all the time. He stepped closer, closing the space between them with slow but deliberate steps. His voice, deep and steady, seemed to fill the entire room. Since the day you walked into this house, Naomi, nothing's been the same. I see the way you take care of everything, the dignity you carry. I fell in love with that. With you. She looked away, feeling the weight of his confession settle on her shoulders like a warm but dangerous cloak. You don't understand. In the world you live in, I would always be the maid. Always judged, always looked down on. And I don't want to live under that gaze. Then live. Under mine, I don't care what they say I care about you. The silence that followed was thick, almost tangible. Outside, the distant sound of a car passing by cut through the tension. Naomi lifted her eyes and saw in him something she had never seen in another man. No games, no vanity, no pretense. Just raw truth. This is going to change your life, Adrian, and I don't know if for the better. Maybe it will. But if I have you, it's worth it. She hesitated for a few seconds, as if each breath were a battle between reason and heart, until a timid smile escaped. Then, let's see how far we can go. He took her hand gently, as though afraid that the mere touch might break. Something precious. That brief contact carried more promises than any word. But the moment was interrupted by the firm sound of footsteps in the hallway. Naomi quickly stepped back, resuming the motion of arranging the dishes, her expression returning to neutrality. The door opened and one of the longest-serving staff members walked in. Her face carried an uncomfortable expression, her eyes avoiding prolonged contact. Naomi, Mrs. Vivian asked you to go upstairs, now. The look the woman gave Adrian said it all. The fragile peace of that moment was about to shatter. The afternoon sun sank lazily over the mansion's perfectly trimmed garden, casting golden reflections on the leaves and flowers. The sweet scent of freshly watered roses mingled with the subtle aroma of hot coffee Naomi carried on a polished silver tray, its shine reflecting the blue sky. The path to the lake was lined with perfectly aligned hedges, and the soft sound of water blended with the distant song of birds. Adrian was seated on a gray stone bench, body slightly leaned forward, watching the artificial lake where colorful koi swam slowly beneath the translucent surface. When he saw her approaching, his features softened as if the tension he carried had been momentarily washed away by her mere presence. "I thought you'd left early today," he said, making room beside him, his voice sounding like an intimate invitation. Naomi placed the tray on the wrought iron table and sat down, keeping her posture straight, shoulders aligned, like someone who weighs each gesture before acting. "I didn't want to leave. I needed to finish a few things, and maybe talk to you about us." Adrian leaned forward, lowering his tone, as if afraid the wind might steal the conversation. She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the rippling reflection of the water where the sunlight danced. "I don't know if it's safe to continue. Your mother," the sentence hung in the air, cut off by a firm, icy voice slicing the silence like a blade. "My mother? What?" Vivian stood a few feet away as if she had appeared out of nowhere. She wore an immaculate white suit that contrasted with the deep green of the grass. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled into a flawless bun, and each step across the lawn made her heels sink slightly into the ground, though she showed no discomfort. Her cold, piercing blue eyes moved between Adrian and Naomi like sharp blades ready to strike. I knew something was wrong. "And now? I see. This is how you intend to repay everything my family has done for you, Naomi, by seducing my son?" In the distance, 2 gardeners and the housekeeper, who was carrying a basket of clean laundry, slowed their pace, attentive to the scene. The air seemed to grow heavier, almost suffocating. Naomi rose slowly, her fingers still faintly marked, from the weight of the tray left on the table. "With all due respect, Mrs. Lancaster, I never needed." Vivian lifted her chin in a sharp gesture, cutting her off. "Of course you did. It's the only explanation for you being here," getting close to him. "A woman in your position doesn't come this close to a Lancaster without wanting something in return." Blood rushed to Naomi's face, but her voice remained steady and clear, filled with pride. "What I want can't be bought, and my worth doesn't come from your last name." The silence that followed was so absolute that even the sound of leaves rustling in the wind seemed to stop. Vivian blinked slowly, perhaps surprised by the boldness, but quickly resumed her controlled expression. Adrian stood, body leaning forward, ready to intervene. But Naomi had already stepped back, holding on to the dignity she refused to lose. "Be careful what you say, Naomi," Vivian's voice lowered, but gained a threatening weight. "The world I know swallows people like you." Naomi didn't respond. She turned and walked back into the house, feeling every gaze that followed her. She passed the staff, who exchanged looks and whispered quietly. Some admired her courage. Others feared the consequences. Adrian remained in the garden, staring at his mother with a look she had never seen before. Pure, direct, unbreakable. Defiance. "If you keep this up, you'll lose more than you imagine," Vivian said before walking away down the rose-lined path, the perfume of the flowers clashing with the weight of her words. Adrian knew she wasn't speaking only about him, and that from that moment on, Naomi would be the target of something far more cruel than glances and whispers. The next morning, the mansion's kitchen was quiet, bathed in soft light streaming through the wide windows, tinting the air with golden hues. Naomi was already there, focused on organizing the pantry, when the door slowly opened. The housekeeper appeared, moving with restrained steps and a neutral expression, though her eyes betrayed a certain discomfort. In her hands was a white envelope embossed with the Lancaster family seal. "Mrs. Vivian asked you to read this immediately," she said, avoiding Naomi's gaze. The envelope's paper was thick, almost heavy. Upon opening it, Naomi found a handwritten letter, the blue ink forming perfect lines in an elegant but cold script. "Your presence in this house is no longer required. You will be generously compensated to leave today." At the end, Vivian's signature was so precise it seemed drawn with a ruler. Minutes later, the measured sound of heels echoed down the hall, approaching with purpose. Vivian entered accompanied by a lawyer, both carrying an air of control. She wore an impeccable navy blue suit and a pearl necklace that caught the light of the crystal chandelier. "You must understand it's best for everyone to end this inappropriate closeness," she said, in the tone of someone discussing a poorly signed contract. Not a life about to be turned upside down. Naomi stood tall, her hands firm on the cold marble counter, feeling its smooth surface under her fingers. "I'm not selling anything, Mrs. Lancaster. Least of all what I feel." Vivian curved her lips into a faint smile that never reached her eyes, which stayed cold and calculating. "What you feel doesn't matter to me. What matters is that you are destroying my son's reputation. And before this scandal spreads, I'm offering enough for you to start a new life far from here." Without a word, the lawyer placed on the table a check with several digits, more money than Naomi would earn in years of work. But the weight of that offer was not in the amount. It was in the silent humiliation it carried. "Do you think I'm here for this?" Naomi asked, her voice laced with indignation. I've worked in this house for 2 years and never asked for anything I didn't earn." Vivian then tilted her head slightly and changed tactics. "Do you know what they're saying out there? That you were fired from a previous job. For misconduct? That you were involved with a married client. Maybe I should share those details with the papers."
Or with Adrian himself.
Naomi's heart raced, a tightness pressing against her chest. Even so, her posture didn't falter. "I know the truth. And he will too." Vivian stepped forward, lowering her voice until it became a whisper heavy with threat. "Don't underestimate the power of my circle. People like me shape narratives and destroy reputations." Naomi took a deep breath, holding her anger in check so it wouldn't show more than it should. "You can destroy my image, but you won't erase what's between us. I'm not leaving." For a moment, Vivian just stared at her as if calculating her next move before stepping back. She turned on her heels and left with the lawyer, the rhythmic sound of her heels echoing down the hall until it faded. Alone, Naomi looked at the check on the table. She gripped it tightly, tore it into small pieces, and threw it in the trash. The act, simple but heavy with meaning, sealed something inevitable. She had just declared war. And she knew Vivian's next move would no longer come with disguised offers, but with far crueler blows. The mansion's dining room was steeped in an almost ceremonial silence, broken only by the discreet sound of cutlery gliding over fine porcelain. The crystal chandelier hung imposingly above the long, dark wooden table, scattering beams of light that reflected off the wine glasses' shine. Only 2 places were occupied, Adrian at one end, Vivian at the other. Between them, an empty space that felt much larger than the physical distance, filled with years of unspoken expectations and demands. Vivian cut her fillet with elegant, precise, almost mechanical movements. The knife's blade gleamed under the light, each gesture seeming calculated to convey control. Adrian, for his part, kept his gaze lowered, fixed on his plate, the fingers of his left hand tightening slightly around the napkin on his lap as he took a deep breath to keep his composure. "We need to talk about Naomi." Vivian's fork paused in midair for a brief moment before she set it carefully on the plate, producing a delicate chime that, in the silence of the room, sounded like a final punctuation. "I'm not surprised that's the topic. I thought that after my offer, she would have the decency to disappear." Adrian lifted his eyes and this time didn't look away. His tone was firm, leaving no room for hesitation. "She's not going anywhere. I love her, Mother. And I'm not going to marry any of those women you introduced." Vivian kept her posture impeccably straight, her face serene like a mask, but the slight stiffening of her shoulders betrayed her. "You don't understand what's at stake. A strategic marriage is the foundation for securing our family's future, our business, and you're willing to throw it all away for an employee? For an amazing, intelligent, loyal woman, far more dignified than anyone I've ever met in this circle." Vivian slowly placed her hands on the table, leaning forward in a controlled but tense movement. "If you go through with this, Adrian, you'll lose everything. Your position in the company, the shareholders' trust, and the inheritance your father built. There will be no turning back." Adrian took a deep breath, feeling the room's cold air contrast with the heat of the decision burning inside him. "Maybe I don't want any of that if the price is giving her up." The silence that followed was thick, almost tangible. Vivian stared at him for a few seconds, as if searching for a crack in his resolve. But what she saw was something she couldn't control. "You'll regret this," she said, leaning back in her chair, her voice cold and sharp as steel. Adrian rose slowly, the napkin slipping from his hands onto the table with a soft but loaded sound. "I'd rather regret fighting for love?" than live trapped in a contract I never wanted to sign. He walked away with steady steps, not looking back. The sound of his shoes echoed over the marble floor until it disappeared down the hallway. Vivian remained alone, holding her wine glass delicately, but her gaze lost in the void betrayed that. She was already planning her next move. Deep down, she knew the battle she was about to wage against her own son wouldn't be clean, and to win, she was willing to go much further than he could imagine. That night, Adrian drove aimlessly through the illuminated avenues of Los Angeles. Neon signs reflected on the hood of his car, and the lights of tall buildings streaked across the windshield like fragments of color. His mother's cold words still echoed in his mind, repeating like an unwelcome refrain. He knew the decision he was about to make would hurt him as much as it would hurt her, but there was no alternative. If he wanted to protect Naomi, he had to act now, and that meant stepping away, at least for a while. The next morning, Naomi was in the laundry room, steam still rising from the stack of freshly ironed sheets. Her uniform carried the soft scent of lavender mixed with the humid heat of the iron. She folded each piece with precision, trying to ignore the heaviness she had felt since the day before. The door opened quietly, revealing Adrian. His face showed signs of sleepless nights, his tie loosened, and his eyes carrying a weariness that wasn't just physical. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. She sat, the sheet down on the counter, a chill running through her stomach. "What is it now?" "The pressure's getting worse, Naomi. My mother, she won't stop. And I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Her eyes narrowed, and a knot formed in her throat. "So that's it? You're giving up?" "No. But I need to step away for a while. It's the only way to make room to fix this." She stepped back, as if trying to find air in a space that suddenly felt suffocating. "Are you talking about space, or about leaving me?" "I'm talking about protecting you." The silence that followed was so heavy it seemed to swallow even the distant sound of wind rattling the windows. Naomi's heart tightened as she searched his face for any sign that this was just a misunderstanding. But Adrian stood firm, even though, inside, every word he spoke weighed unbearably. "If that's what you want," she said, turning back to her work, though her hands trembled slightly. Adrian hesitated, opened his mouth as if to say more, but closed it again. He left without looking back, each step down the hallway echoing like a dull blow. In the days that followed, Naomi saw him less and less. Messages became rare, short. His smile, when it appeared, seemed distant, almost mechanical. She believed she was losing the man she loved, not knowing that. Behind the silence, Adrian was spending nights in discreet meetings with investors, architects, and lawyers, building something in secret. On a rainy night, locked in the office of a trusted friend, the steady sound of water hitting the windows marked the moment's rhythm. Adrian, his expression focused, signed a contract that meant more than a business deal. It was the start of an independent company, free from his mother's control. As he pressed the pen to the paper, he thought of Naomi and the day he could finally tell her the truth. What he didn't imagine was that, while he worked in the shadows to protect her, Vivian had already found another way to strike. And this time, it wouldn't be just threats, but something that could destroy Naomi's life forever. Autumn arrived with cold winds sweeping the wide streets of Beverly Hills, making golden and reddish leaves swirl over the asphalt. Among luxurious salons, discreet meetings, and private dinners, a rumor began to gain strength. Vivian Lancaster was at the center of a financial scandal. One of her closest allies, heiress to one of the most influential families on the West Coast, had pulled millions of dollars from a joint investment and, to make matters worse, exposed compromising documents that put Vivian's credibility in question. The newspapers began covering the matter with short, cautious notes, but in private conversations, where power and malice mixed, the story spread freely and without filters. In the office of her mansion, Vivian paced like a caged lioness, gripping the phone tightly. The space, once impeccably organized, now had papers scattered around and an untouched glass of wine on the desk. Her voice, normally controlled and commanding, trembled with irritation. "This is absurd, Claire. You know that if you back out now, you'll destroy the entire project," she shouted into the speakerphone, stopping in front of the window. Her blue eyes pierced through the glass, landing on the garden where, months earlier, she had caught Naomi beside Adrian. The memory seemed to burn. Meanwhile, across town, Naomi sat in a small, cozy cafe in Inglewood. The rich aroma of freshly ground coffee mingled with the soft sound of background music. She stirred her cappuccino absent-mindedly, watching the foam swirl in the cup, when her phone lit up with a notification. A bold headline filled the screen. "Vivian Lancaster's partnership suffers multi-million-dollar blow." Her first instinct was to ignore it, but something inside her, a quiet premonition, told her it could change everything. That same night, a familiar sound echoed at the door of her small apartment. When she opened it, Naomi found Adrian, his shoulders slightly hunched from fatigue, but his eyes carrying the same determination she had seen months earlier. "I shouldn't be here, but I need your help." She hesitated for a moment, studying him, before stepping aside to let him in. "I thought you'd moved on, Adrian. I never did. I've been working on the company project. And now, with my mother weakened, maybe it's time to secure the last investment we need. But I need something only you can offer." Naomi frowned, arms crossed like a shield. "And what would that be?" "You have contacts I don't. People who trust you, who believe in your work. Investors who don't care about the Lancaster name, but care about results." She looked at him seriously. "Why would I do this, after everything?" "Because I know that, despite everything, you believe in what we can build together. I'm not just talking about business, Naomi. I'm talking about us." The silence that settled was broken only by the distant sound of a train crossing the tracks, like a reminder that time was passing. Naomi took a deep breath, remembering the night she cried believing he had abandoned her. But now, looking into his eyes, she realized that every step back he had taken had been calculated to protect her. "All right, but we do it my way." A few days later, Naomi arranged a meeting with two former clients she had provided administrative consulting for before working at the mansion. The meeting took place in a private room of an elegant restaurant with wide windows and soft lighting. In just a few hours of conversation, she not only convinced the investors to believe in the project, but also presented solid ideas that improved Adrian's business plan, strategic cost cuts, targeted marketing actions, and a repositioning that would make the new company stand out quickly in the market. When Adrian received the news that the investment was confirmed, the emotion was clear on his face. "You just saved the project and gave me back the chance to win without depending on my mother." But Naomi knew that this victory, sweet as it was, carried a risk. Once Vivian discovered that the threat she had fought so hard to remove had been the key to Adrian's comeback, she would not let it go unpunished. And her next move could be the most dangerous of all. The main hall of the Los Angeles Convention Center pulsed with vibrant energy. Glass walls rose to the ceiling, revealing a panoramic view of the illuminated city, where the lights of skyscrapers sparkled like a sea of artificial stars. At the center, A minimalist stage displayed in elegant golden letters the logo of Adrian's new company. Television cameras adjusted their angles, journalists typed frantically on their tablets, and business people exchanged strategic whispers. Every seat was filled, all waiting for the speech that would mark the official launch of the new venture. At the back of the hall, Naomi stayed discreet. She wore a simple but perfectly tailored navy blue dress that hugged her figure with elegance and complemented the warm tone of her skin. Her hair was loose, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Until that moment, she believed Adrian had invited her only as a spectator, nothing more. The stage lights brightened, and Adrian walked into a round of applause. His black suit fit him flawlessly, projecting sobriety and confidence. But what drew attention was the sparkle in his eyes, a light that came not from the spotlights, but from something much deeper. He began by thanking the investors and the team, his voice firm yet full of emotion. Then he paused. He took a deep breath, as though preparing to cross a line from which there would be no return. Today we celebrate much more than Zivin, start of a company. We celebrate freedom, integrity, and love. A murmur spread through the audience. Some cameras zoomed in, sensing that something important was about to happen. When everyone told me I had to follow the path others chose for me, there was someone who made me believe I could create my own. This person believed in me, even when I doubted myself. He extended his hand, his gaze fixed toward the back of the hall. Naomi Clarke. Come up here. Her heart pounded so hard it seemed to echo in her ears. For an instant, she wanted to refuse, to stay invisible. But the eyes that turned toward her and the resolve on Adrian's face made her rise. Each step down the central aisle felt amplified, the sound of her heels echoing in the silent space. When she reached the stage, Adrian welcomed her. With a genuine smile, so open it seemed to outshine the spotlights. He took the microphone again and before everyone declared, "This is the woman I love. The woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." The hall erupted in murmurs, flashes bursting from every side. In the front row, Vivian kept her face impassive, but her eyes couldn't hide the shock. Adrian pulled a small box from his pocket, revealing a ring that caught the light with an almost symbolic brilliance. "Naomi, will you marry me?" She brought her hand to her mouth, surprised, feeling emotion tighten her chest. Still, her answer came clear and firm. Yes. The applause that followed was deafening. Journalists rushed closer, eager to capture every detail. Within minutes, videos and photos of the scene were circulating on social media, with bold headlines like "Millionaire rejects heiresses and chooses former maid," and "Love wins." The story of Adrian and Naomi. Naomi felt the power of that moment as something bigger than herself. She knew it wasn't just a personal victory. It was living proof that courage and truth could still change lives, even against all odds. What no one imagined was that, behind the explosion of applause and lights, Vivian had not given up. Her next move wouldn't happen in front of the cameras, but in silence, where blows were colder, sharper, and impossible to predict. The spacious office of the new company reflected the journey Adrian and Naomi had built together. The walls displayed framed photographs of social projects, children smiling in renovated schools, snapshots of inclusion programs the company funded. Each image told part of their story, a story of resilience, work, and purpose. Large glass windows covered almost the entire side wall, letting in the golden light of late afternoon. The glow lit Naomi's face as she sat at the desk reviewing reports, the sunset blending with the soft reflection of her laptop screen. The door opened and Adrian walked in carrying 2 coffees. The rich aroma filled the air. He wore a calm smile, the kind that carried both relief and pride. The board confirmed it. We signed with 3 more NGOs for next year. Naomi looked up and a proud smile formed instantly. That means more jobs, more opportunities. That was our dream, remember? And it's only the beginning, he replied, resting his hand on hers with a firm yet gentle touch. The moment was interrupted by the quiet entrance of the secretary, who seemed to weigh each word before speaking. Naomi, your mother-in-law is here. The silence that followed seemed to compress the air. Naomi took a deep breath and stood, subtly adjusting her blouse as though preparing not just her appearance, but her spirit. In the hallway, she saw Vivian waiting. The woman who had once embodied unshakable poise was now thinner, her platinum hair streaked with discreet white strands that softened her features. Her body, once as straight as a statue, was slightly stooped, and in her eyes, once cold as steel, there was a shadow of vulnerability. "Can we talk?" Vivian asked, her voice lower and less imposing than Naomi remembered. They stepped into a smaller room where privacy seemed to allow masks to fall away. The space was quiet, and only the distant hum of city traffic filled the pauses between words. Vivian kept her eyes on her hands for a few seconds before speaking. "I was wrong about you. About everything. I spent years fighting against something that, deep down, I feared. Not because of who you are, but because I didn't want to admit that my world was wrong." Naomi watched her in silence, feeling the weight and sincerity of the confession. Vivian went on, her voice slightly unsteady. "I've seen what you've built with my son. I've seen the respect people have for you both. And I realized that if I had won back then, I would have destroyed the best thing that ever happened in his life." For a moment, Naomi allowed herself to remember. The humiliations, the veiled threats, the nights she cried alone, the pain of being constantly judged, they all came back. But with them came the image of Adrian, of a love that had survived everything, and the conscious choice not to let resentment be the legacy she carried. She stepped closer to Vivian and, keeping her voice steady, said, "True love doesn't see status, color, or bank accounts. It sees essence." Vivian nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. There were no embraces, no dramatic gestures. But in that moment, something broke, and at the same time, something new was built between them. When Naomi returned to the office, Adrian was standing, waiting. She simply smiled and said, with the serenity of someone who knows they've won silent battles, "Some wounds never disappear, but they stop hurting." The couple moved to the window, standing side by side, looking out at the city they now belonged to, not as outsiders, but as protagonists. And the lesson of their story echoed not only there, but in everyone who knew them. A person's worth is not in what they own, but in who they are. So, what did you think of this story? I'd really love to hear your opinion. Leave a comment with a score from 0 to 10 to tell me how much it moved you. If you liked it, give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel to follow more stories like this one. And before you go, I've picked another moving story for you that will touch your heart even more.